Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome into Andrelczyk Amusement Academy number 10. We've gotten through 10 of these in the short span of a couple of months here. I guess 12, because we've done the Gerstlauer bobsled little mini stream, and earlier this week we did the log flume mini stream, so if you haven't gotten a chance to see those, go catch them on the YouTube channel. But welcome in, welcome in. If this is the first time that you are joining for a AAA stream, welcome. My name is Brian Andrelczyk, and I am a theme park designer in real life, and I like to play RCT, so I am here to show you all how to build realistic coasters in the game and talk about some of the history behind those coasters. Just because I think real coasters are super interesting and the history behind them is even more interesting, so we pick a topic of 9 or so coasters, build an example of each, talk about the history, and maybe we do some bonus ones after that too. And then always happy to have the chat here too, just kind of talking about whatever's on your mind as far as coasters go. So if you were here for Andrelczyk Amusement Academy number 2, we did wooden coasters. We did more modern wooden coasters from Din all the way up through more modern prefab wooden coasters and all that kind of fun stuff. But I said at the time that I wanted to come back and do a classic wooden coaster stream at some point. So we finally gotten to that point. So we're going to do a couple of different things in this one. I've got our 9 coasters set up in here, and we're going to go through a couple of different examples. Mostly by designer, but so what we're going to do is we'll start with kind of a figure 8 side friction type coaster, pretty simple to start off with. Then we'll look at Scenic Railways. We're going to look at Virginia Reels, which is one that I've had a lot of requests for. We will look at the Flying Turns, which we've already kind of sort of done, but at the same time, I think it's worth looking at again just because they're super cool. And then we will have 4 different designers. So we're going to look at John Miller, we're going to look at Herb Schmeck, we're going to look at Harry Traver, and we're going to look at Pryor. Well, Pryor and Church, I suppose, more specifically. And then finally, we're going to end it with the only steel coaster in our mix today, the Steeplechase. We're going to look at the what's left of the more modern varieties of it, and then what was out there beforehand. So, as we always do, we're going to start off on the coaster database. So we're going to make our jump across. By the way, if the stream goes out at any point today, I know last time we did this stream 3 weeks ago, I had all sorts of internet troubles, but if it goes out, just hang tight, we'll get back. It's just a little temporary outage. But, starting here with a side friction coaster. So before upstop wheels, and even after the invention of upstop wheels that prevented coasters from coming out of the track or off of the track, rides essentially rode in a trough. So you can kind of see here where you have the running space for the 2 wheels, and then you have these kind of side runners on either side to guide the ride along. There was not really airtime to speak of. You might have gotten a little bit of lightness on some of the hills, but really not a whole lot. These were generally a little less thrilling coasters. Not to say that there weren't some bigger side friction coasters, because there were. But a lot of where these started, kind of in the late 1800s, early 1900s, were little figure 8 layouts, like this one here. This is Leap the Dips at Lakemont Park. It is the only one still operating, and it is currently the oldest operating coaster in the world, which is pretty darn cool. Unfortunately, it was closed the day that I was there. They were doing some rework on it, but it has since reopened, so we're happy about that. Let's start off with our friends Coaster Force here, and we're going to take a look at the POV of Leap the Dips, just to get an idea of kind of what is going on here. It's a pretty simple coaster. Not a whole lot to it. It's all manually driven as far as, manual braking in the station and everything like that. Pretty kind of neat old style lift hill here, and then you can see the anti-rollback mechanisms are on the side here. These cool just wood slats that hit as you go up the hill. So a pretty cool, interesting way to do that. This is before the anti-rollback mechanism was invented, so this is a pretty interesting way to do it. I don't know if this was something that came in afterwards. It very well could have. This one's been operating since 1904 off and on. It's actually got a little bit of speed to it, despite the fact that it's kind of small. But it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. As far as drops go, this kind of a drop that you're about to see right here, that's about as much as you get. It's generally a figure-8 layout. And you have these kind of crossover dips in the middle. Another one kind of down and up. And then you'll notice here we're reusing structure, so we're stacked right here, so that bottom, middle, and top are all in one set of bents. So that would have saved on construction cost overall and ease of building. You can see right here now we're also going underneath that center track. Come around once more, we're going to cross over one more. This is the biggest drop right here. Whoop! There it is. Be a little bit of weightlessness there, perhaps. And then here we go, a couple little final dips here to the station. 1 and 2 up into the brakes. Brakes are purely friction brakes, controlled by this guy right here, pulling on that lever. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. So let's jump back. I'll take a look. Alrighty. We're gonna take our side friction coaster, which you can't do a whole heck of a lot with this ride in the game. There's no banking to speak of, but as you could see in the video, there's not a whole lot of banking on the real one either. You can, if you have enabled all the piece draw, or the cheat for enable all drawable pieces, you can get the steep drop. We're not going to use that one, but that's something that we'll see here in a little bit once we get to the Scenic Railway. Oh, that's a shame that it got corrupted. I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to use it. That's too bad, because I do think they're interesting and they're definitely underutilized. So let's start with our lift hill. We're not going to go terribly tall because this isn't a very large ride. Now, one of the key things here is we're really going to be limited by our, or as far as size goes, by our crossing. So ideally, we're going to want 4 diagonal crossing pieces. So we want to be able to kind of get down, and then back up again, and then cross. So kind of something like this. And then this will also let us get in here and do a little bit of a curve piece there. Come down, but we are going to have to actually come back through and yep, we're going to hit. Okay, so we're one shy, so let's go back up here. We'll do a straight section here, just to get us lined up a little bit, and then we can play with this a little further. So you'll note that we're 1 out from where we started with this turnaround, which is fine. We'll drop 2 here. We can come up further if we want, but then we're going to get in the way of ride. So first, let's go back and get rid of our vehicles. These are going to run 1-car trains. Just one. I don't really know of an instance with these vehicles where there was more than one going on. Oh, we're actually a little bit off on this. Bit. Fine, we want to go a little further on. Let's take another look at this, see what do. Also check our momentum here, because that's going to be the big thing, is just how much can we get away with, because there's very little momentum on these coasters. I think what we probably want to do is give this a gap right here. And actually get another little bit of a drop there. Kind of widen this whole thing out. Oh, we can't go quite that far just because we've got the next one passing by. So this is the biggest challenge that you're going to find with these, just because we don't have quite the ability to manipulate the diagonal as well as we might like. So you end up having to do a little bit of extra work here as far as that goes. Okay, so there we are up underneath. And we hit this once again. Okay. Let's rethink this just a minute. What we want to have is open this up just a little bit. We're going to square this off a little bit more and give ourselves just a bit of room to do a dip on either side. Historic Saturday, it's the one. I'm excited to do this one. It's been one that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Alright, so we're off by a couple, which we expected, so let's back this up. And we will add in a straight section here. And a straight section here. And that should have us covered for the whole thing. Still off by just one. Okay. But that puts us back to where we ought to be. Okay. So we'll give ourselves a little bit of a dip right there, because we don't quite have the space. If we had another one of these, we would dip down again. So what we probably want to do then, since we're going to run into this issue here, the crossover. Oop. See if we can get away with going straight here. If we can't, then, which we can't, we know we've got to drop right afterwards, but we don't have to necessarily come back up after that first one. And that will actually bring this down a little bit. If you remember from the POV, we had 3 stacked tracks here, and they were all pretty even to each other. So if that bottom one is like on the ground or nearly on the ground, you want this one to be sort of midpoint. Oh, and we're still a little shy where we need to go. So the question is, at this point, you can either go through and make that fit, or since we can't really see it in this regard, it looks, you know, it's a little bit tight here. So we can either kind of fudge it like this, or we can give it some more space by coming back through here. We are actually okay to cross right here. Let's see if we can get away here. Not quite. So still something to consider at least. Can't come back up. But since these last couple crossovers here will be a little lower, then we can have some coming up and down, because we really haven't had any hills yet. It's really just been squeezing in some drops, but that's about it. Let's see. I keep accidentally doing the zoom in thing with this OpenGL, which I don't dislike by any means. I quite like OpenGL so far. Okay. This is the one that we're probably going to have to do some... Oh, we actually can get under there naturally. Okay, so now we've kind of fixed where we were before. This is fine. And we'll come through with this last one here. And what we'll do here is widen out, because that way we're going to line ourselves up with that final base. But a couple of... Not that last one. So this last one, they do offer brakes. It doesn't quite look quite right, but that's okay. Okay, now I give people a lot of crap for block brakes all the time. This is one of those where you don't have block brakes. So, shock to all, block brakes are okay to leave off on this ride. Now, what I would recommend is you go in there and you adjust the timing of your dispatches so that you never have more than one vehicle on the lift hill at one time. That's going to help A, space out your vehicles, and B, it would not have as much stress on the lift hill itself. So that's kind of what I would recommend if you're going kind of in that direction. So let's take a look. We did square this off a little bit. I mean, we could have easily come back through here with the large corners, but I just don't think... First of all, we wouldn't have been able to have the dip on the sides. So since we can't have a gradual drop, then I think this is okay. Yeah, we'll see what the stats are. I don't generally check them, so I will be curious just as you are about what we're going to land on. The speed looks about right. Let's catch this one here on the bottom. Going about 18 miles an hour. Not too bad. We're not in any risk of launching off the track, because that is one of the things in the game. If you go too fast over these hills, you can launch it. There we go. See what that stat generation looks like. You're right, it really is amazing how long these guys have been around. I mean, this coaster is well over 100 years old now, and still going. Granted, all the wood has since been replaced and everything else, so it's a little bit of a misnomer, I suppose, but it's still the same coaster type and design and hills and drops and everything else. So there's the stats. Not great. Low, medium, low. Your flat corners will definitely get that to you. And a little bit of a longer ride for one of these sorts of things. This is a 2,000 foot long coaster, which the real one is 1,400. So, because we're a little bit bigger here, it kind of makes sense. But we will we'll call that one done. And there's number 1. There were a lot of different side friction varieties, so that was sort of the common variety, this figure 8 model, just because it was easy to put in, it was cheap, it was an off-the-shelf kind of model that a couple of vendors would go around installing. But there was also plenty of custom designs with some pretty impressive features. For one, there was one out in Spain that had this just really beautiful setting with huge drops and big corners, and very impressive overall. So definitely a lot of cool stuff to see there, and definitely worth checking out. So let's get to the next one. So I was gonna do a Switchback Railway as part of this this stream, because those are sort of the quintessential original coaster type, sort of recognized as the first modern coaster of sorts. Um, and I know we can do it in the game. I think it just may require some shoestring to get it to look properly right. Um, just because both ends were more or less the same height, and so you need a lift hill on either end. But I'll play around with that some more, and maybe at the end of the stream we can kind of screw around with it and see what is going to happen. But sort of the successor to those early scenic railway or switchback railways were the scenic railways. So we roll on back to RCDB here. Yeah, so one of the lift hills will be backwards, Zara. So it would be one for the reverse incline mode, I think. And maybe it's something you and I can look at here later, with potentially just like a backwards lift and then maybe a hidden booster or something, just to get it to work right. Because the real ones, they didn't have lift hills; they would get caught on an anti-rollback, and then the vendors would push them up to the top. Use a sliding track to switch them over to the other side, and then they would go back down. I believe it was often a turntable so that it went forwards both ways. So, like I said, the Scenic Railway became kind of the big thing after Switchback Railways. But hey, you only missed us doing the switch or the side friction coaster. So, ooh, champagne. All right, fancy. So we're just talking about scenic railways right now. So the L.A. Thompson Scenic Railway Company, Marcus Adna Thompson was the one who invented the Switchback Railway initially. So he kind of kept moving along with history and invented the Scenic Railway, among others. There aren't a lot of scenic railways left in the world. This is one of them at Tivoli Gardens in Denmark. The key feature about this ride is this guy. Not necessarily this guy, but there's a brakeman. So the ride itself is a side friction coaster, so it has the ability to come off the rails, but the control of the ride is controlled by this guy here, this brakeman. So he can, depending on who you've got, the ride can be a little more wild, a little more mild. I'm sure that they're all meant to be more or less the same. Although I will say, of the multiple rides I did on this one, the ride quality varied throughout. So definitely depends on if you get the guy who's a little more daring or the one who wants to keep it a little more family friendly. But what you can kind of see here as we've been going through the pictures is some larger drops here. And this is where the steep drop on that side friction coaster is going to come into play. So we will look at that in a second. See if we've got a good video here. There we go. Good for the Coaster Force ones. Through these ads. There's not too many of these operating in the world still, so this is the only Thompson Scenic Railway left. There are a couple of others, actually just nearby Tivoli Gardens in Denmark, in Bakken. There is a scenic railway that's since been retrofitted with cars from, or vehicles from Kumbak coasters. A little disappointing considering that it's not quite the same with the big heavy lap bar. But there's Prater Park in Austria as well, has a scenic railway, and there's a couple others throughout, like down in Australia. There's still a good scenic railway there. So you can see this is a cable lift hill, and it is fast. So we're cruising up this lift hill. It feels like a big lift hill, but it's also not very, very steep. Mostly because it's a pretty big train, pretty heavy train, and these early lift hill motors, the lower angle it is, the less force it takes to get it up there. So here's our first drop. Nice size big drop here. Coming up over an airtime hill. And then up to a corner. Nice drop here. Now, a lot of these scenic railways had this theming, I mean, hence the scenic name. Not all of them, but quite a few of them did, and they had these nice elaborate scenes and everything, very, you know, Matterhorn-esque, I suppose. Some of them updated, so, you know, Tivoli's put some money into keeping theirs up, keeping theirs running. A couple of good drops here. And then our Mysterious Darkness. There's more drops, more corners. We roll back out of here into the brakes. All covered again. And here's our unload station. Okay. So, let's go build one of these. So I'm going to use one of the custom trains that Space K has made. You can find them on New Element in the Custom Scenery Exchange forum. We are going to use the side friction track just because I think it probably looks the best. In general, I recommend you theme it a little bit when you do them. We'll raise this up just a little bit. How long that train is. Not too long, maybe 3 to 4. We'll give it 4. Space. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to give us both an entrance station and an exit station. We'll go ahead and select our Scenic Railway. And we're going to give it a 3-car train. You can go a little longer if you want. I think I've seen some with 4 cars or less. I've seen 2 cars also. I would really recommend not going anywhere past that. It's not something you would typically see. We're going to give ourselves kind of a wide berth here, just to give some space. Let's adjust ourselves to see what our overall height is. That looks about right. So we'll go with this. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. What I want to do is build up to that drop. So before we do a larger drop, I want to do a little bit of a back and forth here. Hoping to get up and over that, which I can't. All the turns that you're going to see on these rides are going to be at the top of hills, so you're not going to see them set up anywhere else. So for example, you're not going to have a drop and then a corner right after it. Alright, so this is probably a little large for a Scenic Railway, to be honest. But that's, you know, it's okay. We're feeling adventurous. We'll call that our overall ride. Diagonals are key here so that you don't end up with a giant stacked oval, because you want to get both left and right hand corners. What makes these different from a regular wooden coaster? There's still side friction for one, so they, you know, could theoretically come off the track because there are no upstops. The other thing is that they're going to be typically a little more family friendly, and then also they have a brakeman. So really, if you go by that definition, the one at Bakken wouldn't necessarily be considered a Scenic Railway any longer just because it doesn't have a brakeman. And you know what? I just realized we need to crank up this lift hill. Let's see if that looks a little bit better. The steep drops came a little while ago, I think a year or two ago. You have to enable all drawable pieces in the cheats menu to do it. So just keep in mind that. But they are available within. It's sort of similar to the steep to flat and flat to steep in the junior coaster. All right, so we'll get a little bit of this kind of back and forth up here. Nice slow ease to our big drop. And one of the key things that you want to think about as far as this goes is the theming perspective. So I'm putting the station here and this big drop right next to the station so that you can be waiting, queuing up for the ride, and then see the coaster kind of screaming down here right beside you. So that's kind of the idea, is making sure that you've got enough space for that. Now I could come across here and cross over and then do some kind of an interesting bridge perhaps, or something like that. But I think what we'll do is actually put a space here, and then we're going to do a run on the other side here. I'm making sure that these drops are really eased into. I mean, I know this is typically how I build a drop, but I'm especially concerned about it here just to make sure that it's steep, because while those drops were steep, they weren't like crazy steep. All right, where we can, making sure that we stack, because even though you didn't see it in the video when we watched, since there was so much scenery, ride is still going to be stacked like this. So you really want to make sure you pay attention to how that's set up. Since we can't quite get away with doing too much on the diagonal, we're gonna go ahead and just do a little bit of a dip here. Like I said, your theming is really what's gonna set this apart. So that's something to pay attention to. Okay, so we are up underneath of the lift hill right now. Doing a little bit too much drop. We want to get back underneath just like we are right here. And now this will let me get another diagonal drop right here. And I'm at -4 on the other side. My drop is just coming up, so we probably aren't going to get it to fit quite right. So what we'll end up doing here is just doing a drop and a fast corner. We'll go alongside our lift hill here. Hey Ollie, how are you? Getting geared up for your stream also? Fantastic. What are you building tonight? I know you're building on Magic Towers. That's good. Sometimes you just need the stream of consciousness building, I think. Alright, so we're a little too far over here. Do anything quite right, but that's going to put us back underneath the lift hill here. We're moving at a pretty good pace, actually. We're in the 30s. So if If you feel like you're getting too fast, you can put some brakes in here and then just kind of hide them, and it'll simulate a brakeman doing his thing. So that's a consideration also. The other thing to not worry about too much is the amount of straight track. These are really large coasters, and straight track really wasn't an issue. So no big concerns about having long stretches of straight track on a ride like this. So have a look. We're gonna give this one 3 trains. So again, the block sections thing is not necessarily an applicable thing here. It sort of is. So the reason that it is the way that the drivers or brakemen know what they're doing around the track is there's a set of basically red and green traffic lights around, and if it's red, they know that they need to slow down a little bit. All the hills are such that if they have to stop at one point, they can still get it back, because none of the following subsequent hills are taller than the drop beforehand. So you'll get these little hills just like this, but then you'll also see the big drops like this one here. The return hill up out of the drop is not as big as the drop itself. So continually getting smaller as you go along is a thing. We could also have gone through and done like a double down or a double up somewhere in here. That's another cool feature that you can do that makes these kind of rides fun. Like I said, we're a little fast on the bottom, so you'd probably want to come in here and stick some kind of brake section in there somewhere. The only one that I'm a little not happy with is this one here, because I said earlier when I was building these that the turns typically go at the top of the corners, so it doesn't really make sense for us to have one at the set up like where it was. So we're just going to do this, stretch that out nicely, and do that. Theoretically, if you did this as a scenic railway of sorts, this would be inside on some of those sections, and then have your indoor bits and pieces. So not too bad. I think if you did want to have block brakes, you can. I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. And honestly, a lot of parks, I mean, Bakken in particular, with the way that they replaced the one train there, or the vehicles with non-brakeman vehicles, they did a whole block system and everything on their ride. So you could come back and kind of say, all right, I retrofitted my ride to have a block section, and it looks like this. So I think that's a totally valid option to do. So definitely a consideration for you. Yeah, I think 6-seater wooden coaster is going to be your best option here. I'm trying to think of anything that might be better. You could almost use the Schwarzkopf Jetstar ones. What are they called in game? Do I not even have them? Oh, these guys, the Spiral Roller Coaster. I think you could use that. Also, maybe it's a little more streamlined. Actually, yeah, Reverser Coaster is not a bad option too. That could be a good one. We just don't reverse it. Actually, Reverser Coaster is probably your best bet. I think those vehicles would look the most correct. It's a good question, though. I think there's a couple of different options you could do, but Reverser or 6-seater is probably going to be your best bet, because most of these trains were 4 or more people deep, like 4 to 5 rows deep. So that's something to consider. All right. So there we are. Number 2. Here's our collection. Oop. Backing it up. All right. So this is the one that kind of started the whole stream as far as when I was coming up with this collection of rides, is the Virginia Reel. This is a very underutilized ride in RCT, but it looks like it would have been an absolute blast to ride. So I'm a little sad that none of them exist in person anymore. So let's check them out. So these were kind of 1900s to 1920 ride. So here's what they looked like. Basically, this was the precursor to the Wild Mouse. Switchbacks that kind of slowly dropped over time, and actually had a little bit of a decent drop at the end. And we're gonna use some track merging here to get some drops in this guy. So a lot of these had the same layout. I don't think they all had the same, but they were all pretty darn similar to something like this, where you had your switchbacks and then you had this kind of curving drop here at the end that had this kind of double helix, and then it went back underneath and back into the station. Now, I've never been able to see a video or plans of these, so I don't know if it did another set of switchbacks underneath or what. My guess is no. But we do have some cool old videos here, so we can kind of take a look. Set up a video, maybe I'll bring it. So first of all, gotta love the classy dress. I don't know the last time I went in a suit and tie and my bowler hat to a theme park, but I maybe ought to do that again. Tubs were big. I mean, you look at that. There's 1, 2, 3, 7 people, 8 people. It looks like in there. This is true. In Florida, this would be less pleasant, but I don't know. There's something about the aesthetic that I'm a huge fan of. So this one is at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and you can see it's the similar layout to the one that we just saw earlier. You can also see, based on the blocking that, or lack thereof, that they had a lot of vehicles on this. It looks like they might have, based on how it's running now, it looks like they might have loaded 4 vehicles at once and then sent them all out at once. All right, that's it for that one. But actually, this was a pretty cool channel. BFI, they had a couple of other cool ones on there, so definitely worth looking at. But yeah, it's one of the few videos that I've seen out there of these rides in existence. So certainly a cool treat to be able to see that. All right, so let's build one. And yeah, that is the thing too. That theming is just, in general, they were very classy. They had their, cool. Let's go back for just a second, just because it is neat. So they had these pretty awesome lift hill lights and things like that. You have this backdrop of New York City here. This one was at Seabreeze, which is in northwest New York, along the Great Lakes. Great windmill here. All this little lattice work all around. Really beautiful ride. Like it just looks nice for one, but yeah, definitely a neat one to theme. I think if you ever did a turn of the century type park, which I had started one ages and ages ago, but I never did finish it. It's one that I'd certainly love to reach back out to at some point. All right, so what we're gonna do for this is actually build backwards, ish. So what I want to do is build those sections of drop first. And we're going to use the wooden coaster for it, I think. Question is how exactly to get it to fit, and if you want to do a second. Because what I don't quite feel like the ride is big enough for one of these guys. Like, I really don't think that drop. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. It seems a little large to me as far as this goes. Yeah. Maybe we only have one curved drop, and then the rest is all little bit different. Because they weren't large rides. They were pretty small, to be honest. Let's see. Kind of had that one more almost. It was almost like this drop again. Let's see. I kind of want to do this and then make this one go. Shockingly, that fits. Did not expect that. The one thing that I haven't been thinking about that just crossed my mind is that the real one, or the Virginia Reel, doesn't have the large corners, so we may have to see which one we like better when it comes down to it. This is going to look a little nicer, I think, if I do a hill here first. I like this nested feel. I do like the nested feel here. And I don't think it would be out of place to use the side friction by any means. So maybe it's a layered approach. Maybe it is. We'll go ahead and keep that. Why not? Let's go ahead and change it to the... oh no, let's keep this so we can at least see what we're doing. We will have to change back to the Virginia Reel for the actual Wild Mouse portion here, but before we do, sorry for changing so much, mark this out. This is our return run. We've got this much worth of track. And then this is our lift hill. Okay. Look back and kind of count where we're looking. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 switchbacks in total. So this will be 1 here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Apu. I like to have them at least a little bit level if you can, but no matter. Need to build backwards here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Watch. Oh, there we are. Okay. Let's see if we can get that drop off the lift hill. Not. Okay, actually that works pretty well. We want a space before. Yeah, that actually works great. So typically you'd set this up with a load station and an unload station, I would say. So our center line is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4. Okay, so right there. built these with lift hill. Okay, so now the only thing that we've got left to do is this this closure point. And like I said, I've not ever seen the inside of one of these, what was underneath. So my only assumption could be that it was really just a turnaround and popping out to the brakes. So that's what we're going to do. We can set it as either diagonal or just, you know, a full corner like that. Kind of like the idea of a diagonal. Game doesn't have it. And we'll put our reel track, which does not have brakes, by the way. This is one of the least pieces, or the ride with one of the least amount of stuff or pieces that you've got. I think it's probably worth having a couple of brakes in here, just in case. Don't know what kind of speed we're going to be getting on this. Okay, hut 1, hut 2. Let's go back to here. Now, I would really love if the Virginia reel had those diving corners, because I'm not a huge fan of using the wooden on this. I just don't quite think it looks as nice, but fine. For a pretty standard ride as far as layout goes, but like I said, I think there were some varieties out there, so it's not totally the only thing. But I think if you're going for true realism, then it's probably you want to stick to something similar to this kind of a layout. I can understand the use of side friction just because it was probably a better look overall. My general complaint with it is just I think that the diving corner was one of like the key elements of this kind of a ride, so I want to keep it as best as I can. But that said, I totally would understand why you wouldn't want to do that. We can always go back to and add in that kind of stuff later. But anyway, let's go. Individual tubs. Yeah, you can certainly adjust track layering as you might. I feel like 8 seems appropriate here. Judging by the video from Blackpool, it looks like they loaded 4 at a time and then sent them all at once, because if you'll notice, there weren't any more vehicles after those 4 that were running down the ride. So unless they just set that up as a video stunt, perhaps it would seem to me that they would load up a couple at a time and then send it down. Based on where they were on the ride layout, multiple tubs would be on the lift hill at the same time, so I think that's an acceptable thing as far as this goes, so the spacing is correct. But you don't want to totally fill it, I think. You don't want to get to the point where you've got, like 30 tubs running around this ride. I don't think you'd want more than, say, I don't know, maybe 10. If this was modern, they would probably put a block system on it, with some kind of probably set up like a wild mouse, to be honest. Let me see though, because there actually was a let me see if I can find it quick while we're watching this. Those of you who know your Arrow history very well might know that Arrow made one. They didn't ever build it in an actual park, but thanks to American Coaster Enthusiasts, we can see this little clip of one of the videos out in Clearfield, Utah at Arrow's test facility. Basically a wild mouse frame with a big tub. I'm sure there's a lap bar or some kind of a bar in there, although it doesn't actually look like it, surprisingly. Yeah, June, July 9th. Oh, that's funny. That would have been a couple months before I was born. That's great. But yeah, it's definitely a neat thing. So if you ever put the Virginia Reel tubs on some Wild Mouse track in the game, you can call it realistic if you really want to do that. So definitely worth the look. Um, but and if you haven't checked out the American Coaster Enthusiast Arrow documentary, it's substantially good, like really good. Totally worth seeing. Um, I do miss when when manufacturers did their full scale testing like this. It looks like it wasn't made to get up further on the side. I don't remember this as part of that footage, to be honest. I don't think it was intentional. A lot of these tests have a purpose-built rollback, essentially. So anyway, that's our Virginia Reel. I hope to see tons of these in future DKMP and other contests. All right. Next up is our last of the kind of fun, weird stuff. We're going to build a flying turns. Now, we've already kind of done this when we did the bobsled builds, but Norman Bartlett was the builder of flying turns back in the 1920s. So this was this is a guy who basically just went around building these. He also did some other coasters and flat rides and things as well. Of current event note, Kennywood just recently announced that they're pulling out a couple of their historic flat rides, which is a shame, especially because the Kangaroo flat ride, which they're pulling out, was developed by Norman Bartlett, who developed these flying turns. So a cool connection to some old history and a little bit of a disappointment. So hopefully another park like Knoebels may slide in there and save those. So yeah, it's definitely a disappointing news week as far as that goes, just because there's some really neat rides and they were still a lot of fun. When I was in Kennywood, I rode the Kangaroo and it was great. It was a lot of fun. So anyway, flying turns. There were a couple of them, more than maybe you might expect. Let's see here. So, Englishman John Norman Bartlett built these. A lot of these he built in the U.S., although not all of them. He actually built one in Portugal and or Brazil. I'm sorry, and then one in England also. But the ones in the U.S. were the most kind of famous. One of the really cool ones was Palisades Park because it had a very interesting climbing corner that you can't really do in the game at the moment. And actually, I did save a photo here to put up from Steeplechase Park in Coney Island, and some of these are kind of some of my favorite old photos. So this is the flying turns at Steeplechase Park. This was actually made from a wooden coaster. So the lift hill, this kind of section, the straight section right here, and then the first curve and drop, those all came from a wooden coaster that existed there beforehand. But in 1934, this was built, and it had a very short lifespan of only 5 years. It burned down in 1939. But you can kind of see a couple of interesting features here. mostly. They've got the enclosed lift hill, and you can see the name on the top of it there. That's kind of cool. You've got your big drop, a surprisingly big drop, with this climbing corner that basically whips you right around and into this kind of figure eight turnaround back and forth. At some point, it crosses under the steeplechase, the 6-lane, or actually 8-lane steeplechase ride, and goes onto the other side, then back into the station itself. Beautiful, beautiful ride. They're just, they certainly look the part for sure. And actually, we've got some further old time footage here, thanks to Swamp Foxer um, on YouTube. He's done a lot of really cool history digging up. But let's take a look at this. A lot of the parks burned down, to be honest, which is not surprising based on how they were built. They all had the really cool, well, not all of them, but a lot of them had the really cool airplane front wings on them. Again, loving the dress. But this is the one at Euclid Beach. Euclid Beach's was, I believe, the tallest and the fastest. I think probably the longest, too. It was pretty substantial. Always cool to see these old footages of rides, I guess. And it's even more impressive, kind of when you think about it, that it took Knoebels um, about 7 years to get theirs right, and theirs isn't super intense. It's not very big, um, but it took quite a long time to get it correct. Now, granted, there's a lot more safety measures and other things that are going to have to come along as part of that, but um, it still was a pretty impressive thing for the day. Um, so not at all. We lost technology, but it was still a really impressive build. Only these two small photos on RCDB of the Euclid Beach one. You can look up more. I would say if you're going to look up any, look up photos of the Palisades Park one, just because it had a really cool drop climb thing to it. So we're going to actually use that. We're going to try and build our own kind of climb into a bobsled section. So we are going to use the bobsled track because we need that for most of it. But for some of the elements that we can't do, we'll switch over for some of the their bits and pieces. So let's take a look here. Back. Okay. We don't want to get too high off the ground, but we want to get enough that we can get a little bit of a water coaster, wooden coaster. Be able to get a little bit of climb out of this. All right, let's go to wood. The in-game bobsled is based off of the Mock Rides bobsled. You can tell because it has the striations here, which were the tubes, because the Mock Rides version is basically just a bunch of semicircle ribs with a bunch of steel tubes all run close side by side to make a surface. Okay. So what we're going to do here is get ourselves a little bit of a back and forth cutback going on. Fiberglass doesn't hold up to that kind of a thing, so you can't really run you can't run a heavy like a heavy thing like that over top of fiberglass. It just won't hold up, unfortunately. We are. You're going to need clearances enabled for this just to get it just right. Yeah, unfortunately, fiberglass itself doesn't quite hold up the same way that you might see. You might see this sort of thing go. So that's why it's got that metal ribbing to it. The thing that made these kind of rides what they were, or it was this like back and forth um, of this. And actually, I think I'm going to remove the big turn here. I like the smaller look overall. Just the consistent look, I think, more so than the size. So in order to build this, what you need to consider is when you do the turnaround, you need to have a diving helix for one, and then a flat piece for the other, and then the very next one has to be the drop. You drop first underneath, then you curve, and then the next one's flat, back to the next bit. So I'm actually going to keep on going here just a little bit. I want some additional height. So you really end up building this on the diagonal. And then two, we had our big drop that you might remember on the one we were looking at earlier. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. So we are 8 high at the most, so that puts us at 9 here. Wrap the edge of this just so. This is another one of those rides that could benefit from a ton more pieces. Always forget to turn off my lift hill. We'll put our station there right here. Although let's see how we can come out of this and we can come around. Call that a diagonal brake run. And we'll say it's going to run 2 trains. Yeah, it's probably going to have some good speed. So, something to watch out for. Let's see. And I'm showing 6 cars on that one. And while some of them did have 6 cars, we're not going to have that many. So these are some Space K custom vehicles, the Flying Turns vehicles. They were made for Saxman's Knoebels Park. They're definitely long, maybe a little too long, but I think they look good. See if it fits. Oh, it sure does. Does not have the sprites for diagonal climbs, apparently. Watch this and see what it does. Just make sure that it's not going to do anything weird. It does make it in there, just barely, which is kind of what we want. And these rides did actually pick up some speed in there. I mean, it's not uncommon that they'd be going pretty quick at the end. Oh, I'm totally off. Running why that wasn't lining up. Thanks. Let's knock this out real quick just to get it to look kind of nice. Make sure we clean it up. That looks weird. The way that intersects. No. Something to be cleaned up later, perhaps. So one of the things that you will want to go through now and do is build a wooden coaster up underneath of it so it actually has the wooden coaster supports, since these were wooden coasters with wooden supports. Okay, get rid of that. Now, I'm not going to go through and build all the wooden supports, but I think you get the idea. The challenge with this one, and this comes to an RCT preference thing, is the look of this ride. Because generally, when you build rides, you kind of have kind of the one angle where you built the ride mostly and the one that it looks the best at. This one really doesn't have that, because you've either got this side, which gives you the nice profile of the figure 8, or you've got this side, which gives you the nice lift hill, flat bit, and drop. So something to think about is if you can arrange this so that the figure 8 and the diagonal lift hill, if you went with one of those, were kind of side by side, I think you'll get a better look overall, and it's going to feel a little nicer. Like this one, the layout feels okay, but it also feels a little bit difficult to read. Now, granted, that's not any kind of a realism note or anything. It's really just a visual note. Because really, when you get down to it, RCT is a blend of, at least as far as I play, it's the blend of realism and making your realism look good in the game. So that would be my recommendation for this, is something that sits at a different angle, perhaps, just to help it look a little nicer on the whole. But we will wrap this one up. These are actually a lot of fun to build. I really wish that we can get to the point where we can have these sorts of pieces included. Steep drops, climbing corners, bigger, different helixes, and things like that. Quarter helix would be so nice. So nice. Alright. Soapbox. Okay. So now we're going to look at 4 different manufacturers, or well, I shouldn't say manufacturers. We're going to look at 4 different designers of wooden coasters. In a lot of cases, these were designers who were consultants for PTC, Philadelphia Tobacco Company, and who made, who basically did their own designs and then often operated the coasters also. So some of them had the design business and the construction business. Some of them were operators also. So the way the PTC operated back in the day is they would either sell you a coaster outright, so you could buy it as a park and run the ride yourselves, like all the parks do now, or they would lease it to you. So they would build the coaster. Philadelphia Tobacco Company would come send somebody to basically live there on site and operate the coaster. And then it would be for a certain time, for a certain amount of money, for years, whatever, and that lease could be extended. It could be terminated, at which point PTC would come and take down the coaster, either move it somewhere else or just take it down outright, which did happen. It's sort of a similar way right now to sky coasters. So the sky coasters, the flat rides where you get winched up in your little harness and you pull the cable and you come drop and swing back and forth. Those are typically leased by Ride Entertainment, who has operators who can come and operate those rides. I shouldn't say typical, it goes both ways, but that is a modern day example of this sort of a thing. So I have yet to hear a story of a repo man coming if they miss the payments, but it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. Or they would just take all the profits from the ride instead, just operate it as a PTC stand, I suppose. So there's a ton of manufacturers that we can look at. There's a lot. So I narrowed it down to 4. They're a little bit harder often to come through and talk specifically about each of them, because they all sort of were helping develop and figure out how all these rides came together and what kind of developments could happen over time. So they were all developing as things went on, but there's little things here and there that kind of are characteristics of the designer. So we're going to look at John Miller, who is sort of the big father, or the father of old traditional coasters, I would say. He worked with Norman Bartlett for a while also, the Flying Turns guy. We're going to look at Herb Schmeck, who did a lot of work with PTC and really was one of the first ones to develop diving corners. So for the most part beforehand, you had out and back wooden coasters that had hill after hill after hill, a flat turnaround, hill after hill after hill, and then that's it. Or something like Cyclone, or some variety of that, where you had basically a pretty compact site with a lot of turnarounds and just kind of tight construction throughout the space. See if I have a photo here offhand that we can look at. It was a really great photo I saw yesterday. I was going to use it here, but I don't think I saved it. It was this. But I'll find some other ones and link them here in a little bit. But let's jump back over to the database and let's take a look at John Miller. Now, I did say I had 4 guys. So we had John Miller, we had Herb Schmeck, we had Harry Traver. That's the one that most people are going to know for the Crystal Beach Cyclone, which is often cloned or talked about. So Crystal Beach Cyclone was famed as theoretically the most intense coaster ever made. Be that what it were, it probably was pretty darn intense, I would say. And then we're also going to look at Frank Pryor, who worked with Frederick Church on a number of coasters, notably for that one along the California West Coast. So the current notable two that still exist are Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and Belmont Park, which both have pretty distinctive layouts. There was also one that was similar in Hawaii, of all places, which no longer exists, unfortunately. I really like looking into the old, coaster history, stuff like this. The thing is, it also kind of makes you a little bit sad, just because there are so many cool old coasters that just are long gone, and you'd love to see how they rode, what kind of, how they were overall. But it's definitely a lot of cool stuff. Let's take here, for example. This is John Miller. He designed 150 coasters, at least as far as the database is concerned. I believe it's more than that, but you look through and you look at operating, there's not very many. You have a couple here and a couple on this side, but let's see here. Actually, it's organized. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 John Miller coasters operating currently. A couple of these, like the Zip and Pippin, I mean, this was completely rebuilt here recently, so it's not exactly the same kind of thing. But we go anything from stuff like this, like a little side friction type coaster, all the way up to some larger things. So the Kennywood ones, Jackrabbit and Racer, these are pretty famed for the airtime on these guys. So this double dip right here, pretty darn impressive and a pretty strong set of airtime. What's interesting about this is, I mean, for me anyway, until I started looking into this coaster, you see all that, you see that great drop, and you kind of look at it and think, like, man, that must be a pretty interesting, cool coaster, and that airtime is incredible. But the coaster itself is really just 2 ovals, like just 2 circles of that same oval. There's all left-hand turns. It's a little bit disappointing in that regard, I suppose. But that said, it is a pretty darn cool coaster, especially for as old as it is, from 1920. Just thinking about how that airtime would have been in 1920, when there weren't any restraints, not the grab bar that there is now. I mean, granted, they've still done pretty well to keep it in relative good shape. And then this kind of is the bread and butter of what John Miller ended up doing. Something like this. This is Jackrabbit at Seabreeze. This was 1920. I rode this one a couple years back in 2009. So something like this. Just long, out and back hills. A couple of like double downs, some other elements like that. There's a helix at the end. There's also a tunnel, and just some other fun stuff like this. So for the John Miller coaster, we're gonna build an out and back ride, and we're gonna go take a look at that. There you go. Jackrabbit was a really common name back then. It was one of those sort of like Comet or Thunderbolt or Cyclone. It was all the ones that saw a lot of back then. Okay. So a lot of these, back out. A lot of these early wooden coasters had curved stations. Not really any particular reason or rhyme or reason to say so, but a lot of them did. So we can certainly do that, but I think we'll wait till we do the Herbert Schmeck one to do that. For right now, we'll just start it here. Let's go up a little bit. So a lot of these early ones also had kind of enclosed tunnel starts. So you'd have, say, a drop sort of similar to this, and it would just be enclosed in a tunnel, and then it would kind of pop out the other end and have a hill. So some of them were pretty interesting too, like some pretty wild little compact tunnels. We won't do that here. We will go for the diagonal lift hill. So one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm not banking any of the corners. So the intention is that this would have been more of a curved drop of sorts. So playing for stats, this one is going to give us a little bit more unpleasant stats, but that's okay because we don't play for stats. I'm also going to go ahead and set this up. Let's take our Morgan trains. We'll give those, let's say 5 cars. You can do 5, you can do 6. That doesn't quite matter. Actually, you know what we could do? I want to make this a little more interesting. We can start off with a double down. Look at that airtime in the back seat. You want to sort of ease over all the hills. You get a lot of that airtime from those double down elements, but you're not really going to get a whole lot elsewhere. See what we're looking at here, because what we might do is our turnaround. Yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. Cannot clear it. That's a shame. Let's back this up. See if 11 will work. We were at 10 a little bit ago and it was kind of struggling over, but let's see. What I appreciate about some of the old wooden coasters is that a lot of them just had good hills. So you're not so focused on, doing something crazy on every hill, say like an RMC or some of the other wooden coasters that you see now. It's just, you see a lot of these old wooden coasters where it was literally just a bunch of hills. And I think that's cool. I'm a big fan of that. All right, I'm going to give it just a little bit more speed down here. I want to do one more drop right here. Give that one more. Like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and saying how I kind of miss the the aesthetic and also what I expect the ride quality would be of some of the old wooden coasters, where it was just literally hill after hill after hill of just straight good old-fashioned airtime. I would really love to have experienced some of those things. And I kind of wish there'd be a coaster manufacturer that would offer something like that these days. I mean, yeah, the Yankee Cannonball is a really good example of that. I mean, you kind of get a similar overall feel to it, but you look at some of these really big old ones, and man, there was some crazy good stuff. Okay. Oh, we need one more. It works for me because now it's a little bit higher. Get ourselves a subtle double down right there. We're going to end with the only bit of banking that we're going to do on this ride, this final helix. Actually, that's wide enough that I don't think we even need to bank it. Want 2 more spaces. Do this. Gets us all the brakes that we need. And there we have it. A good old-fashioned Miller type wooden coaster. Couple things that I like about where we landed here. This is a better. Double drop is kind of cool. Subtle crossovers on an out and back layout. So we have this crossover right here. We have this crossover right here. It just makes adds a little more interest to what's otherwise a pretty straightforward layout. This wasn't entirely intentional, but having this hill in the valley of this hill, it looks kind of neat. A lot of manufacturers would or a lot of designers would probably try and say, you can get the hills to line up, that's better, because then you can take advantage of the larger structure, wider structure, and make it work a little nicer. But that's fine. I think this is a decent look for it. Why are we not on block section? Interesting. Did I not put a... Oh, that's why. Oops. So far as trains go on this, you can actually use a lot of different options. You can use the PTC3 bench. You can use, in some cases, these rides have been refurbished with some other things. So like Lagoon's roller coaster actually has GCI Millennium Flyer trains on it, which is kind of a neat thing. Those are part of a 5-year refresh plan from Lagoon to basically rework that coaster and refreshen it up into what it is now. I was actually just out there the other week riding that. It was a great, great coaster. Definitely worth the time. And here's our final helix. Typically, we'd tunnel this thing, so what I would consider doing is tunneling basically from the top of this hill all the way back to kind of halfway through this this drop. You might even go the whole 180 of the flat corner here. Track on the ground. I know I've said this a lot of times in other streams, is that you don't put track on the ground in the game, but the wooden coasters are about the one exception of that, because the way the bents are set up, you can really get down there on the ground. The steel coasters, you need that footer, you need the pier, and you need the actual footer itself for the column to sit on. So while you can sit a track directly on a footer, you still need that height for the footer. So steel coasters, I don't recommend putting on the ground like this because I think that looks unrealistic. Wooden coasters, I think you can go ahead and do. Pretty cool airtime there. Let's see how bad as far as the game's concerned, the unbanked corners didn't do too badly. We definitely have a lot of lateral forces. Nothing in the red as far as the game's concerned, but that's fine. 7-something seconds of airtime, which is not bad. We'll take it. We'll definitely take it. Okay, so that is John Miller. That is John Miller down. And next up, we're going to do not Church. Next up, we're going to do Schmeck. Then we're going to do Traver. Then we're going to do Pryor and Church. And then we'll do Steeplechase. I usually stop at the 2-hour mark or at the 5 coasters whenever I get there for our break time. So we're not at 2 hours quite yet. We've been moving pretty quickly through this. So I'm going to take our break now. And welcome back. Thank you guys for waiting. If you are just joining us or you came in partway through the stream, welcome to Andrelczyk Amusement Academy, where a real-life theme park designer teaches you guys about coaster history and how to build realistic coasters in the game. So, we have been doing historic coasters today. So far, by means of a recap, we have built a side friction coaster. I realize I never did do our colors for. We're going to make that all white. Then after that, we came through and we did a Scenic Railway, which is a little bit monster of a Scenic Railway, I will admit, but not too bad. I think maybe you stretch it out a little longer, perhaps, and then have it perhaps maybe a little bit narrower. That may be a better look overall. From there, we did a Virginia Reel with the diving corners. You could probably get one less of the switchbacks too. I know this is realistic based on what was done at Blackpool and other places, but for the game, you may want to squash it up a little bit. Then we did a flying turns with some other kind of unique features like the diagonal lift hill, steep drop, diving corner, things like that. So that's another cool consideration. And then we just finished up with the first of our 4 designers. This is a John Miller wooden coaster. Kind of has the traditional out and back type design, all unbanked corners, pretty smooth hills, and just a nice good look overall. See a comment while I was out. You still try and keep the above the ground for aesthetics. Yes, I would totally agree with that. The only reason that I would see this as okay is putting it in a tunnel. I don't hate it for realism purposes, but I would also just put it in a tunnel. A, for realism, and B, for I think it looks all right. One of the things that you want to consider here too when you do these sorts of rides is put a cover over your brake run, a themed cover, or heck, you could even use a coaster track or something like that. So cover over the brake runs, usually all the way back. Because when these first opened, these were skid brakes, and the skid brakes can't really get wet because they're totally ineffective if they're wet. So you should put some kind of a canopy over top of it. I would typically do a some kind of themed canopy, but you could also get in there and do like a layered track kind of thing. You could get in there with this or you know, some other method, I'm sure, and put a cover over top of it. But you want to have your brake run all the way back to your station covered. That's a key feature. Okay. So we said that next up was Herb Schmeck. So let's go back to, not that, to the database. And let's take a look. So Herbert Paul Schmeck. He was a consultant for PTC. He did most of his designs for them. He was really the one who developed out the diving corner. Some of the earliest, or kind of middle through his career, kind of started getting into these more diving corners, and they became more and more aggressive over time. And he actually designed some pretty cool aggressive coasters. Not a whole lot operating. There's actually only 5 left that are operating. Wildcat has since been rebuilt by GCI. Roller Coaster has been pretty heavily modified. Comet's a kids coaster. Thunderhawk's still hanging in there, and then Comet's probably the one that's the most recognizable in its original form. Definitely a little heavily braked, but this was my first large coaster, so I'm a huge fan of Comet. This is a classic coaster to me, and it's a one that was a little later in his career. This is actually 1946 when this one opened, which when you look at it at the grand scheme of things, we kind of went from 1921 all the way up to 1955. So quite a lot in there. But some pretty cool steep drops and some things like that. It's a good spot of Hershey Park, just with Comet, with Great Bear, with Super Duper Looper, Sky Rush. All of that whole area is just so well done. I'm a big fan of it. Mountain Flyer, we have the Rocket is very famous from Ocean View Park. Via this. And the Adora Park Wildcat, which was incredibly famous. You can see this nice diving corner that he had put together. Nice big drop, flat corner up here. Yeah, this one. All right, here we're gonna look at Swamp Foxer again, and he did a nice, like I said, he's got a very nice collection of old coasters here. A lot of coaster history. Adora Park was one of those that's very much missed as far as things go. But so here we got this big drop, really fast first hill right there. And we got this great diving corner here. Nice hill getting us adjusted up to the brake run, or to the lift hill. Another diving corner down here. A little bit of banking, enough that we could say we'll bank that. Some kind of weird banking there. I thought that was a little bit of an oddball thing. Another little flat corner there, and then we're going to dive into this tunnel. You'll notice this whole covered bit because this is all braking. So all these straight bits right here, those are all brakes. Skid brakes. Benefit of skid brakes is you can do it around a corner. You can't do that with clamp brakes. So yeah, so his memento there, it is a shame that those had burned. So thanks to Swamp Foxer for that video there. So let's try and build something kind of sort of like this. Look at this one. Back to the game. Sort of like a Cyclone type coaster, but not totally the same. One of the things to note on this one is just the approach to the station, or the approach to the lift hill, was a pretty long, kind of drawn out thing. Really trying to see it, looking back at some of the videos or the photos. Yeah, that one set of banking was a little bit odd. Definitely a little strange. Let's go this way. You know what we'll do is we'll kind of build this a little bit backwards. Start with the lift hill. I don't know why this is default color on wooden coasters. Nobody uses this. Or at least no realism uses that. There are colored wooden coasters out there. And Kingdom Coaster at Dutch Wonderland is probably the most famous of those, in that it's bright blue and purple, but it's not a good look. Okay. Let's do this. Yeah, there's that one too. They're not. I've yet to see a painted wooden coaster that looks kind of classy, I suppose. Okay. This is going to put us up at 11 height. Let me see if we can't get this turned right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, maybe a little bit of a stretch. Change your mind again. Kind of looking for 11. But we'll see what 12 does. Let's get a test just to be certain. I'm gonna use the 6-seater PTC trains. A lot of these early trains were going to be NAD, National Amusement Device trains. That's not a custom one that's been built yet, as far as I'm aware. So we'll use this instead. Not where the station will end up sitting, I don't think. Ooh, just barely, but not to my satisfaction. Not a huge fan of that. Want to get 7. This is what a lot of coaster building ends up being in this game, is just measurements to get things to line up properly. If that actually covers it. I like to reverse ourselves and go the other way here. But I don't think I want to go all the way back up to 11. Let's see what that looks like, just out of curiosity. Too slow. We'll take this. Give ourselves a little double down here. Here. Debate whether or not we bank this climbing corner over here. You can kind of go either way with it. I think we view this corner here as more of a flat corner that really just a directional adjustment more than anything. But it also puts us at this point where we can't quite get out of underneath. The ideal situation is that we end up alongside on the inside here. I think we could potentially do here if we do this. One less. Still a little bit tight, a little bit tighter than we might like. We can always do the tighter drop like that, which is not necessarily the way to go, but will work. alongside. You can kind of get away with a lot of these more undulating type hills than something where you have to be all the way down to the ground after every hill. Right. So we banked the... You have to consider as far as banking goes. We've only banked this corner here at the end. I would say as far as which corners you bank and which corners you don't, you consider what's going to be close to the ground and which ones are not. So I'm going to bank that one there because it's basically right on the ground. Out here for our brake run. A lot of the old brake runs are pretty long because the skid brakes took a while. So don't be afraid of too much brake run. Just for the purposes of the overall look, I'm going to go right up to the drop there. I think we can do it in 4, but just barely. We'll give it 5. Now this whole first bit here would be something that we'd tunnel. This is pretty common to what you might see. The small turn here, not my favorite, I will say. But in the tunnel, I think that can be okay. This is another one that if you want to get fancy, you can shoestring the diagonal brakes, but I think there's any need to do that. Not the most photogenic coaster by any means, but not too bad. Let's take a look. Good, I'm glad that it looks okay. We stayed with the kind of typical tenets that you want to try and consider, is especially when you're doing rides like this where it's more or less a double out and back layout, just making sure that you have the track runs that align so that you're not going back and forth all over the place. You get a lot of crossovers. We're trying to kind of play off of the larger structure up above and below. And then the way that I like to think about these is that you don't really consider your station placement as within the overall kind of structure of the space. The station is sort of the, it's nice when you can ever fit it in, but it's not a, it shouldn't necessarily dictate your overall layout as a whole. Out of curiosity, let's see how we did. We get a very high. I'm guessing that's from this drop right there, which I would have preferred to have as a larger drop, but and also one that went to the ground, but so it goes. I think that's an okay trade-off. Okay. All that number 6. Okay. Whoop. Still getting used to that OpenGL zoom. I was only able to convert to it just here recently. Okay. So now the one that most people know is Harry Guy Traver. Traver was... Your dog enjoys the sound of my voice. My dog certainly doesn't. He'll go into the other room. But I'm glad to hear. Good to have fans, both human and dog alike. So, Harry Traver is famous or infamous, no matter which way you want to go, as a coaster builder in the 1920s, 30s, for making super crazy intense coasters. The famous one of, well, the 3 famous ones are the Crystal Beach Cyclone and the Lightning at Revere Beach, and the Cyclone at Palisades, I think, is the other one. Famous / infamous for being super intense, a lot of tight corners, a lot of tight airtime hills, and all sorts of other weird stuff like trick track and lots of little hills and other fun stuff like that. This ride has been recreated a ton of different times in RCT. So we're not going to do a straight recreation of it, but we'll do something inspired by it. Here's Swamp Foxer again, who has the inside track on all these old coasters. So let's take a look at this one. This was really pushing the limits of coaster design at the time. Look at how steep that drop is, how tall that climb is. You'll notice the kickers on the side that kind of make this look like side friction track, just to really strengthen up and support those rails. And an inclined helix was just crazy impressive. Look at that. That's the real picture of the thing. There's the trick track. So the story is that they had a nurse stationed on the platform for guests that had passed out on the ride. While that was true, it's most likely this was also a marketing ploy to talk up the coaster to what it was, which is fair. I certainly wouldn't have, been upset about that, or at least I'd take advantage of that as a park owner, for sure. But the wildness of the ride was certainly one of its draws. There's a lot of cool stuff on this one. If you go back to Herb Schmeck, there's actually an entire book on Herb Schmeck's designs. It's titled under his name, so definitely check that one out if you're interested in ride histories and everything. Go buy that book. Very interesting. Goes through the entire career and all the rides, and you learn quite a bit as far as just ride design goes. So very worthwhile. But All right. Well, we will. Oh, here so we can catch his name at the end. Give credit where credit is due. Thank you, Swamp Foxer. Please don't copyright strike me. So all right, let's build one of these. The ride wasn't very tall. I mean, the whole thing was only 96 feet tall, which, granted, was pretty tall at the time. Not crazy so. All right, let's get ourselves a base. Right here. Okay. You can do this in a couple of different ways as far as these rides go, for the drop. So typically on a steel coaster, you would end up doing a um, a drop and then a kind of the steep drop and then kind of roll out of it with your larger banked corner. Kind of looking at some of these, I almost feel like you want to go more so like that. That doesn't quite look the best. So think about this a little bit more and see. I don't think it's too much to say that you could go with a flat corner. Also not a good look. We'll stick with this for now. What I'm not a huge fan of in this case is the lack of width. Looking for a slightly larger width ride, but that's okay. We can make do. Because like I said, we're not doing a full recreation. We're just doing an inspired by. Means we can do our own thing. One flat piece would be acceptable on top. The helix on the far side was one of the big things that sort of set this apart as a pretty crazy ride. Really, the earlier coasters like this didn't quite have that sort of a helix. This was not a thing that you put on these rides. Can't quite get out of it that easily. Can do that though. Work for our purposes. Yeah, it's fun because it kind of throws a lot of stuff out the window as far as the way that you smooth things and some of the weird bits that we're gonna do for it. It's definitely an interesting ride. Okay. So let's just to be almost on the ground just so we don't get in any trouble later. Kind of don't want this to be where it is. Get the first one there, then we'll do one. We'll do two. And these little step ups were a thing that was on the real one, just buried in the structure. A pretty crazy thing to think of that anybody would have that on a ride these days, but fair game back then. Crystal Beat Cyclone 1 looks too intense for me. Alright, let's see here. Let's start figuring out what our speed's gonna look like on this. So I'm using the Gerstlauer trains, which is not something you want to hear when you're already talking about an intense, probably painful coaster, but nonetheless, we're gonna give this a try with a 5-car train. I don't know if I have the stream channel thing running. Not this time. I should actually re-enable that because I had disabled it. I was having some FPS issues, but with OpenGL, that seems to have been corrected, except when you do uh, see-through scenery. Okay, so let's see how we're doing speed-wise. Not bad. See what this disaster looks like. Oof. Oh. Yikes. Alright, so we're doing good speed-wise. Yeah, it doesn't look awful, I'll say that. It's got... doing kind of alright. Yeah. Trying to figure out where we can even fit it in at this point. This is the problem with it being a little too narrow, like I was saying earlier, as far as the drop goes, is we're running out of space to put stuff. Because ideally what I'm wanting here is to get up and over the lift hill and back down in. Trying to think through this a little bit better. Right now I'm saying it's got to come back through there twice more. I don't think that's what we want. Let's wonder if we can't. And I'll still put those in, not to worry. Want this on the ground is the hard part. I don't think I can clear it there. I kind of want my first one coming over here to go back this way, then wrap around, and then come through into the brakes. It's really just a matter of sequencing to see how you can fit a lot of this in here. This may work. So all right, let's. I guess it's not to say we can't just wrap it up like we did earlier. What we had was all right. All right, it was 1, 2, 1, 1, then down. Kind of liking it to do some kind of a figure 8 of sorts. Just shy of actually being able to get across that. But then we would run into the helix. That may not be our best option there. A tough one. That kind of, maybe that's actually useful. Kind of gets us where we're looking. Cross through this whole thing. Only downside for this is that I can't quite do what I want to do. Ideally, the brake one would wrap around and come underneath. Yeah, I need a little bit more space. I need this to stay on the ground, which I'm okay with. I could just adjust that out a little bit. This little dive there, we gotta get to 3. Okay, that's our S-bend underneath. In the way. Now it's just getting messy, is the problem. I need it just one higher. This is not gonna let me do. Oof. Oof, oof, oof. So here's what I'm trying to do, is trying to run underneath and then come out on that side of the lift hill. That's why we got our clearances as they were. Hey, Hydro. We have 2 more, and then whatever it's going to take to finish this one, which is being a pain at the moment. But only because I'm having trouble getting it to do what I want it to do. How are you doing this afternoon, sir? Okay. That gets us up underneath. A little wider than we wanted. But it does get us there. We can still do some weirdo banking. Yeah, that's a good thought too, with the banked to unbanked. Would have maybe not been a bad idea for that final drop there. Let's see how this looks, and we can always revise it some other time. Oop. Presume. 2. Alright. Oof, manual labor all morning, not fun. This thing ended up being awfully compact. We're 21, 2, 27 by like about 10. Not bad. Traver was also known for the Cyclone Racer, which was out in Long Beach, California, and it was really famous just because it was a racing coaster out on a pier. It was the only thing out on the pier. Pretty substantially big ride. Had some pretty darn cool stuff. Worth looking up. There's a lot of pictures of it. There's a lot of good work that's been done into documenting that ride. So I don't dislike this. I do dislike how it sticks out on the side because generally I like to make it stay as close as it can. I do like that we got the little airtime hills in there like the real thing did. That's probably going to kill our stats. Surprisingly not. Surprisingly not at all, actually. Not near as much airtime as the John Miller one, which I would somewhat beg to disagree about, but I guess this is more a little intense. So this is Harry Traver, designer. So something similar to the Crystal Beach Cyclone. Like I said, though, if you're looking for a full recreation of this kind of a ride, there are lots of folks who have done this in the game, so it shouldn't be too hard to track down some of those. All right. So the last of our 4 manufacturers that we're going to, or designers, I suppose, that we're going to look at is Frank Pryor. So Pryor was a designer out in California who did a number of coasters. He did 4 actual designed coasters that he's credited with, and then also 11 as a builder. The 2 most famous and the 2 that are still in existence are Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and Belmont Park. Santa Cruz is by far the more intense of the 2. This was built by Arthur Loaf, who also did carousels. But this is a National Historic Landmark, actually 1987 here, recognized by the National Park Service. Let's see what we've got. Take a look at our Coaster Force POV here. Ooh. Let's go. So these are definitely cyclone-based rides where it's tight layout with a lot of back and forth within a space, generally like a double out and back type layout, which is kind of what this one is. You can see that great tunnel start, diving corner. That was a really big thing on old wooden coasters, that before you even got to the lift hill, you went through a nice long tunnel that had all sorts of different stuff. I've seen one that was like a three spiral all in a row and then kind of dropped out and underneath to finish. It was very cool. Mountain Flyer, I think it was called. So check out that cool fan curve, which is something we're going to try and emulate. We have this climb up to this drop on this side. I don't think we're going to bank those. not a big ride, as you can see. Definitely is squeezing itself in there. It doesn't necessarily look super intense, but honestly, I found this ride to be a very intense coaster overall. It was a lot of fun. Full of good airtime hills in there. Using that structure, getting up underneath and in between. That's kind of what made this one interesting, is the structure is very close together. Right there, just how you're underneath the other track. Note the covering over the brake run. There you have it. That's Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. Giant Dipper. Curved Station 2, which we'll go ahead and try and also emulate. So, thank you to East Coaster General from Coaster Force. Let's jump back into the game here. So we will get ourselves a wooden coaster. We're going to use the Morgan trains. Morgan is out of California, DH Morgan Manufacturing, and in addition to the hypercoasters and things that they made, wooden coaster trains were one of the others. And they got a pretty good following in a number of different spots, just from an ease of care and retrofitting old wooden coasters. So they were definitely popular trains. They were kind of known as the California style because of Morgan being in California, and a lot of the California parks had them on rides. I can think of at least 4 offhand. So it was definitely a thing over there for sure. Alrighty. So the station itself, we're gonna do some level of curvature to it, and then we will put our little station platform there. Then out of the station, have our drop. This whole bit would be tunneled. All is white. Get the red here. Get the white handrails. Definitely a classic look. I don't see a whole lot of wooden coasters carrying that anymore. Medium-sized coaster doesn't have to be super tall. Do make your lift hill go up and over a little bit. Probably taller than it needs to be honest. This is going to be too tall. This is that fan corner that we saw earlier. Let's get our Morgan train. Another Space-Case special. Said earlier. Gonna use a 6-car train. Yeah, so in general, when I'm building in the game, I really don't like using a climbing hill into a diving hill in the same direction. I don't quite think it looks super nice. But sometimes we're unavoidably forced to. am actually going to put a straight piece on top just to give it a little more, there. What's up, Ollie? Did you forget, what were you going to do? Oh, well, I appreciate that, but I get you. No worries. So a lot of this this turnaround over here takes place above the station. Ooh. Curve. There we are. I'm doing Prior and Church. We're actually looking at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, Big Dipper, as a consideration. Oop. We're a little bit short on the overall design here. I need a little bit more height for it. Not too bad. It's actually okay to have it a little bit slow. And there we get lucky with our coaster lining up very nicely there at the bottom of the drop. Now let's see how we're doing speed-wise here. We might want to adjust this a little bit. Not too bad. Definitely slow, but it's an appropriate slow, I think. Um, Probably the one that is most known for is Belmont Park, from Head to Head 6, maybe, that G-Wiz had made. Coupon did something similar to Dragon Coaster at Playland Park in his Baker Lake park. So that may be what you're thinking of. Yeah, Fred did a nice job on his too. I think G-Wiz still kind of remains as the best one of these in the game, I would say. But there's a lot of really good varieties out there that you can take. Also, hey BG, welcome in. Let's I'm gonna do a couple of little hills here instead. Especially after we were going kind of slower earlier. What I want to do is get ourselves to a point where we can go flat here and then drop, just like we did on this other side. That's just going to be a little too short. There we go. Get that drop. Also get ourselves a nice little double up right there. And we're going to utilize this structure. As we return back to the station. Put some brakes on this. Go. Let's put a block brake right here. That'll let us run 2 of these. Only downside to your single tile station here is you've got not a whole lot of space to put your huts, so you got to move them around. Although I'd honestly set that up, you could set it up very easily as a 1 load station, 1 unload station potentially. So there's a little bit of pacing issue on this. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because this ride does have a little bit of this where it just kind of hangs for a minute before it drops over the edge. So like this one here, a little bit slow, but not really that bad. This hill is maybe the worst offender, right here as we just kind of ease over the edge, but you get a nice little tug over the top, and I think it works okay. But there you have it. That's a Pryor and Church. Frank Pryor, Frederick Church. Really utilizing those nice sweeping diving corners, compact layout. You got that curved station. Those are some of the key features that you would want to consider when you're building in that variety. Okay, so the last thing that we want to do is look at the steeplechase, and I'm gonna touch on what the old one was, and then we can more so look at a more modern one. Like I said, we're gonna go back to this picture that we looked at earlier. We looked at the bobsled before, and then I pointed out the steeplechase, the 2 sets of 4 here that run through the space. This is what old steeplechase rides were. It was literally just like 3 or 4 across. It got as large as 8. I think there was a 12-lane one at one point, but 8 was typically the biggest. You saw a lot of 6-lane rides like this, where you sat up on top of the horse and you went along. But yeah, it was definitely a big thing. These were some of the earliest steel coaster designs. But yeah, it's pretty good. Is it Orlando rain time? Actually, it is getting dark outside. It's not raining just yet. I don't know if I'm picking up any other stuff in the background, but not raining just yet, but soon, as Orlando tends to do. So what I will look at is the legacy of what these rides became. So this ride, no, it's probably just my chair squeaking, perhaps. I need to get a new chair. I'm actually surprised this one still hasn't fallen apart. So if there's a giant crash one day and I stop talking, because the chair broke. So this is the only existing steeplechase ride that still is operating. So this is Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This is a 3-lane racing slide or coaster, red, green, and yellow. You might recall when we looked at Jappy's Bumbly Beach Park that he had a 2-lane version of this, and I actually thought it was incredibly well done. But this is a cool looking ride. Arrow had a series called Special Coaster Systems that they built over a couple of years, just a bunch of various rides, and this was one of them. They built one here and they built one at Knott's Berry Farm. It was a 4-lane variety. That one ended up going from the motorcycles to ride-in soapbox derby cars. This one has remained as horses the entire time. Those were the only two that were built, but they're pretty cool. Let's see. I'm sure we can get a coaster force video of this. There it is. Okay. What did I just do? I want Velocicoaster testing, at least not right now. All right. There's not a lot to these rides. It's pretty straightforward. 3 is probably as much as you want to go in the game, mostly because the spacing in the game is a little wider than you might get here. So 6 lanes is going to be kind of incredible if you try and fit something like that in. You can see the 2 lift hills on either side, kind of a neat design. It's a pretty straightforward ride design. It's a pretty simple ride too. Kind of exposed as you're sitting way up there on the horse too. You'll note the supports basically come cover the entire ride there, so they're not supporting each one individually. A little bit wobbly. Little, like an airtime hill here and there, but not a whole lot. It's mostly just cornering. There is banking, which is a little bit disappointing that we don't have some form of banking on the ones in the game, but it may not be enough to really kind of trigger that overall look. There is a second lift hill here. Knott's Berry Farms also had a second lift hill, which makes sense. This intertwines quite well with the other coasters. That Big Dipper right there, this is a John Miller coaster. It's a smart way to do it with the 2 lift hills because you're not going to get binding on the train with pulling it from one side, since you can't pull it from the center. So I think it's a clever idea for sure. And here we are up and into the ride itself. So there we are. I didn't do anything like, I mean, sort of. We did this John Miller out and back variety. I guess that was sort of similar to, but we'll go through them in a minute. All right, so what I want to do for this one is we're going to build one of the more, we'll say modern, even though it's old, like we had at Blackpool. We'll start here. Go ahead and build these side by side. We can do 3, but I feel like 2 is just easier to deal with in general, so I'm only going to do 2. Straight first here before we... Not very big, and you generally want your terrain to follow it a little bit. You don't want to get too high off the ground. No, the switchback didn't happen yet. I haven't done that, or I haven't decided if I want to do it yet, or how I'm going to do it when we get there. But I do want to try it if we can. Yeah, Yeah, good. I will post the download here. Let me save this just so I don't forget. There's been a couple of these so far where I actually haven't saved the whole way, so not the best. We can do diagonals on this, which is kind of nice. Problem is, it just gets a little bit weird when you have multiple rides because you end up with you kind of have to stretch it a little bit like this. Well, let's see what it looks like. Why not? And we're not necessarily concerned with racing in this instance, but we can certainly make sure that we're alternating the corners that we're doing. We ran right into it. Nope. All right, so we'll do this kind of second lift hill right here. I thought about doing a dueling coaster stream at one point, but the amount of time it takes to come up with a proper dueling coaster when you're worried about timing and everything is probably not worth the effort for people to sit here and actually watch that. It's going to take a while. Level this off at 7 because I don't think we want to go too much higher. We do have brakes, and we do have block brakes too, which is somewhat surprising based on kind of where we are on this type of ride, but we will go ahead and put those in. The thing with dueling coasters is it's trial and error, mostly error, and just trying to get it right. I mean, it's taken me days in some cases to get ones semi-correct. Alright, let's pause this real quick, and then we're gonna send both of these continuous circuits. Oh. Rid of this. Single car trains, they don't go in an actual train on this. So a single individual. Up and up. Okay. That one. This one. All right. See how they run together. Expecting green to kind of dominate here a little bit. Nice thing is that the brake is a good equalizer and it helps catch things up a little bit. drop up underneath. They'll help us catch up for our green one here. Let's see how that does. Vekoma steeplechase. Do you mean the Zamperla motorbike one with the steeplechase trains? Or am I thinking of something different? Right. Agree with a nice lead out in front. We'll see if we can't close it here. Okay. Not too bad. Yeah, so that's Zamperla. So Zamperla made a motorbike coaster of sorts. Same idea as the Vekomas that you were referencing. So it's yeah, I mean that's something we can do. The standard layout is actually really difficult to make in RCT because I tried and I spent a lot of time trying to get it right. It's a little bit compact as far as getting everything to fit goes, so I couldn't quite get it to work out. We'll try and wrap this up. So it was a little airtime bump right there. The second half is a fair bit longer, it looks like, than the first half, which means that we're going to run into some block issues as far as block breaks go. So let's do this. Let's give ourselves an unload station. And then we'll go back through here and put in the tighter corners. So we can give ourselves one more. And then run 4 per side. So, green side, orange side. Okay. So we will sync with adjacent. Sync with adjacent. Test. Test. Whoop. Okay. Let's see how it looks. You really want a lot of space for these rides. This is not something that you're going to put into a compact spot. Jappy did his in a pretty tight location, which I thought still looked pretty nice. But you're generally going to be building this in a pretty large area. Keep in mind, as far as other ride interactions go, these are older rides. So, for example, Steeplechase was built at Blackpool in 1977. So, in general, you're going to be building other rides around this ride. So consider when the thing's opened when you build your ride, so it doesn't end up being a little bit too out of place. So this would generally come first, and the other stuff would go around it, unless, of course, it's a wooden coaster from the 1920s, for example. All right, so that finishes pretty well close. So what we would do from a theming standpoint is I would go ahead and put the like the finishing pylon right here, or here, I guess. You can get out of the hill and actually see it. Let's take a look. That. So I think that's what we'll do. Challenge with block brakes and with a lot of these vehicles is you need to make sure that they clear the block brakes before the next one gets to the blocks, because otherwise, if that's the case, then they're all going to hold up and dispatch at weird intervals, or release at weird intervals. Yeah, stats. High, and medium, so not too bad, I would say. Like, here's going to be an issue of block brakes. Let's check this out. There's 3 issues here. So first issue is we're off of the lift hill, and this one's already going to get to that lift hill before these even get to the block brakes. So these are going to both stop on the lift. There they have it. Now green's going to start first, and then orange is going to start after it. So now they're off to the races. And now these guys will clear this one before this next one gets to that block, because I put a block before lift 2. But these guys are not going to get to the end of the ride before the ones on the second lift hill get to the top, by actually a pretty long way, to the point where we're actually going to stack up both of the vehicles behind it. So we're going to stack this one, we're going to stack the other green one there, and then both oranges. So that is not good as far as blocking goes. So in order to fix something like this, you'd go ahead and you would stretch out your dispatch interval to make it look a little better. The best way to combat this is you want your block sections to get progressively a little bit shorter each time, just to make sure that you can make them fit, or just put in more than you need, because you don't really want that first block to be super short and then all the other ones to be long, because then you're just going to get in the way of the rest. You are correct. Dispatch interval isn't really considered in test mode, or at least as far as I've found. So it's one of those things where you really just have to open the ride and send it that way. But that is our last number 9 today. But we're going to do a couple of bonus ones because I'm ahead of time. And yeah, I wish it was too. I would hope that that's something that they can implement at some point here in the game at a later date. So, all right. So yes, I'll get to the Switchback Railroad in 1 second. First, let's do our recap as we always do. So we started with our Scenic Railway right here. Figure 8 Scenic Railway, similar to, or sorry, not Scenic Railway, side friction. Figure 8 side friction. And very similar to a lot of these rides that you would see back in the turn of the century. Pretty simple, pretty slow. Not a whole lot of variation to them. I like to paint mine white. You could do, browns and whatever else. So what coasters were typically whitewashed because it offered a nice protection to the wood itself, and it also ended up looking pretty just better in general. Nowadays, there's a little less push to make it white because it's harder to find imperfections in the wood. So that's a little bit typical, or difficult, I suppose. Old school cool, I can go for that. Since I don't have the feature turned on, I'll go ahead and just name it. I will turn it on for next stream. All right. Next up, Scenic Railway. Scenic Railway. So this one is a little bit of a monster. and maybe a little bit bigger than it needs to be. Was the wooden loud mouse not part of this era? It's a little bit later. A little later. It's not to say we can't build one. Can certainly consider it. So, Scenic Railway, big thing here is that you've got your brakeman. So you can do more steep elements, but you definitely want to have the flat corners throughout. You want to have the corners at the upper end of the drop, so you want to climb into the corner and not drop out of the corner. And probably space these trains out a little bit more. Fast cable lift and some relatively low things. Generally, these are going to come with a lot of theming. All right, then we did our Virginia reel here with some cool diving corners. Obviously, the diving corner is a trade-off since it doesn't exist in the game. It's going to have to be done with something else like wooden coaster. So a little disappointing as far as the overall look goes, but I don't think it's a bad thing by any means. But I don't mind it. I'm a fan of that one. I think it turned out really well. All right, where's our flying turn? Here it is. All right, so then we looked at a wooden bobsled, the flying turns. This one's kind of based off of the Steeplechase Park one. So we have the steep drop, we have the climbing corner, we have our figure 8 stacked thing right here. Like I said earlier, this one's just visually not good in RCT right now. A, because of just the amalgamation of track, just the mess of it, and B, because you can't take in the whole thing from one angle. Either the lift hill or this whole stack of curves there should have been done separately. So I have some ideas for how I could do that. So maybe it's worth considering for a future stream or look. All right. Then we had 4 different designers that we looked into for old school coasters. Generally, they were consultants for like PTC, for example. So this is the first one, John Miller, doing an out and back coaster, flat corners, some nice hills, some decent airtime, a lot of like double ups, double downs. So that's the kind of stuff that you saw here. Turn around on this side, you can see a couple of little double downs here. And a few airtime hills, and then this great big helix at the end that we said we would probably tunnel. So you'd probably want to take this tunnel and wrap it through. I'd probably take it all the way through there. Yeah, the airtime is going to be less intense typically because you didn't have the restraints that you have these days. So you're never going to get negative 1G, for example. I mean, that would never happen back then, but you will still get some airtime. Okay, so this is our Herb Schmeck design, which introduces the diving corners, unbanked. We do have a couple of banked corners in here, though, some of the faster locations. Both Miller and Schmeck's career spanned such a huge amount of time that there's a lot of variety that you can do. So this is just one of a lot of different things. I would have loved to have recreated Comet, but it's really difficult to do in the game because the first turn, or the first hill and the drop after the first turnaround are right next to each other, and so you don't really have that kind of ability to move things around on the diagonal. So not something that we can easily do in RCT and make look good. So unfortunately, we're gonna miss that. But we have our nice pre-lift big tunnel section here, kind of ugly with the one small corner in there, but not too bad. All right, then we went for Traver, famous maybe, for these pretty crazy, wild, intense designs. Oops. Yeah. So big things here that we're looking at are these really steep drops, these high banked corners, compact design overall. Compound corners like this climbing left-right, or right-left, I guess. deal, this big inclined helix, things like that you really didn't see on other coasters at the time. This was far and away what, beyond what other rides were doing at the time. I mean, this would be like if in the early 1990s, RMC came along and started doing their thing. So it's definitely a huge step up from what was going on at the time. I mean, to somewhat of a detriment, just because it was a little too intense, maybe a little too aggressive. So it is definitely impressive and cool, but not necessarily what worked for everybody. These actually had steel supports on the track in a lot of cases. I mean, granted, the Coney Island Cyclone also has that. So it was an early hybrid. But it was useful just because the steel is going to last a little longer. It was also cheaper and easier to build at the time, I'm guessing. Flat steel was cheap at the time. When Crystal Beach Cyclone was taken down, part of the lift hill was used for the Crystal Beach Comet, which now resides at Great Escape up in New York. So the Cyclone lives on to some, small extent, perhaps. All right, and then we did our Prior End Church. Little layout here with the Morgan trains, California Classic trains. Have our curved station up underneath that far turnaround there. The fan corners being our big signature element here, these kind of nice corners climbing up. There's definitely a lot of speed manipulation here as far as making sure that you eased around the corners and then you had that nice drop out of it. So here, more than any, shows that really well, where it kind of just gets over and then kind of pulls down and whips over the end. You have that pause before you get kind of yanked down with the backseat airtime. You need to add some brakes in there too. And then our last one is the Steeplechase. We looked at the more modern Arrow Steeplechase, not the original 6 and 8 lane Steeplechase ones that made it in a lot of those parks. So let's look at a couple of bonus ones, just because it's not even 3:30 yet, and typically we go for 4 hours. I don't think we're going to go the whole time today, though, but who knows. So I said Steeplechase. Let's get side friction, just because I think that maybe looked a little better. This is something that's going to have to be hacked, and I'm not going to do the hack right now, just because I don't want to sit here and try and derive that on stream. I am on the East Coast, so it is currently 5:17. So the session has been going for 3 hours and 20 minutes. No, I'm Florida-based. In Orlando. So first of all, let's pull up some... yeah, sorry, clock time, not... So let's have a look. So Switchback Railways were the original modern coaster, I suppose, as far as it goes. There's a couple of different things. So this was an early patent for it, where you basically just went down this little hill, and then there was a winch that lifted the vehicle up and put it back on the top, and then it went down the other side. That wasn't quite how the Scenic Railways went for, or Switchback Railways went for others. So it was more of they get caught up and then pushed up to the top again. Let's take a look at this. 1898. You can see the guys in the back pushing that one up to the top. Here they go. They're going to catch this one. Goes up the anti-rollback here. And then you can see the guys are going to push that up. So they're the lift hills. Little successive drops on everything. Make sure you have your cane, your bowler hat, of course. So that was pretty cool. Thanks to Phoenix Cinema Trust. Very cool. Try and build one of these. It's pretty similar to that French coaster, I would think. Let's actually go to the wooden coaster because it looks more like a flat rail. So this may be a better look overall. We probably want to go, say, to that height. They weren't very big. And you weren't really getting steep drops either. Working back up to that 6 elevation there. And then they'd basically turn around and do it again. And in some cases, it was a reversible seat, basically. And in other cases, it was a turntable up top. So like a bench seat that you could sit either way, or a turntable. There's actually a lot of pretty cool ones worth of these out there, including some pretty cool support methods and things like that. Yeah, you could certainly flip it. I mean, I'd be fine since it's double wide, just using the tight wild mouse corner. That's probably where it would be worth going. So we would just do this, and then I had to turn this around. So let me just get a... yeah, Wild Mouse, Virginia Reel, any of those would very easily go. Then it's just a matter of putting the chain lift on either side. I think there's definitely some other ways we can do, or things that can be done here. I'm trying to remember what I had before. There we go. Something like that. And then we'll ask for just a little short chain lift here. A little short chain lift here. Oh yeah, you can run a chain lift through the whole thing. If you want. I think our Scenic Railway single car probably going to be the most useful here. we go. This is the height of thrill back in the day. Or double down there. Little hill. Catch it up at the top. Out of curiosity, let's see what this gives us. Low. All right, 1,000 feet, not too bad. I think usually they were 500 feet out and back. I think sometimes they were 800 feet, so not too bad. Too bad at all, actually. All right, so last one I'll do. Let's look at how. Is all right, 58. That's fine. Okay. We're gonna look at the wild mouse. So let's do that. So it wasn't 1900s and 1920s. This was more 1950s in that case. So the one for Blackpool, which is this one, was 1958. So these vehicles, you can see those center rails in the middle. Those had a little pin in them that caused the vehicle to lean out in the corners. So pretty crazy stuff. I've never got a chance to ride one of these. Unfortunately, Blackpool's was suddenly taken down a couple years ago, which was a shame. But there are still a couple in existence, but not a whole lot. So it's definitely a rare breed. Pretty cool first drop there. Nice little fan corner there, which we're not going to be able to do, but we'll do similar, I suppose. Then you have your traditional switchbacks. Not too many, though. Straight sections not being an issue here. Nice big drop again. Full drop in the hill. Third corner. Using the stacked fence there. Bring you back to the station. Alright, next coaster force for that video. Okay. Let's find our wild mouse ride here. And let's check it out. See what we can do. Certainly adjust that later. Okay. All right. So, question was, ride inside or outside? Go one more. Let's see here. I don't think we have the mouse cars. We'll stick with the mine cars, which is also a thing. The nice thing that you have with the wild mouse here is the ability to do the steep to flat corners, which is what we're going to find out if we need right here. Just a second. Ooh. Speed is an issue, for sure. See if we can't launch this thing over the top. This is one that you might want to play with the mass in the game, because it does lose speed awfully quickly. Yeah, we're not even close to making that hill. And we really should be. Oof. Boy, that's tough. Speed is definitely going to be an issue here. We can keep things stacked. Hoping I can get back up to that 5 level. Not easily. Back up to that height, we should be alright. Backside. Well, thanks for joining. I appreciate you stopping by. Hopefully you enjoyed the stream, learned something new. Okay, we're a little bit slow, but I don't think that's going to be too bad. Okay, and then we'll entrance exit. Alright, so that is our attempt at a Blackpool style Wild Mouse. I think the thing to consider about this one is just how quickly they lose speed in this game. So just seeing that we are at 14 miles an hour, 13 miles an hour at height 10, and after one drop, we are at 6 miles an hour, 3 heights underneath of that. So it's not good. You're right, Mark. With Peeps, it might be a little bit better. It probably will be a little bit better. But generally, you don't want to rely on Peeps for your overall performance. So hopefully it'll be a little bit better if we throw some Peeps on there, but I guess remains to be seen. But that was a good call for whoever suggested this. but it was a good thought. They aren't quite 1880s to 1920s, but not too bad. Yeah, Zara, the mass change is going to be what you really want to do for these. So I would recommend doing that. All right. So I think we'll call it. And thank you, Hydro, for suggesting that. But yeah, I think we'll call it here. We'll give you 20 minutes back from the usual schedule. But yeah, we're not longer train. Yeah, I mean, if you did a shoestring, maybe you could set that up for some more mass. But you don't. The Wild Mouse wouldn't have a train. It's all individual stuff. But all right. So as usual, thank you guys for coming. If you missed some of the stream or you want to get the download for this, go to my YouTube channel. You can find the link in just below on my page here. So go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to that, just so you can get all the updates for this and all the park reviews and hack tutorials that I do. Also still working on doing more streams and things like that. Follow me here on Twitch, so you can get the updates whenever I go live. I usually post them all in the Discords and everything, but don't always. So this is the best way to find out if I'm going live here. If you want to help out the channel too, feel free to subscribe here. If you have Amazon Prime, it is free, so you can also do that to help out. But really, the subscription to the YouTube channel is the biggest thing for me right now, just to help the channel grow and get out to more folks. We're definitely seeing a lot of new faces as we approach 500 subscribers, so that's a pretty cool deal after only a couple of months here. So thank you guys very much for the support so far. But that's it for today. I really appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you have any suggestions for future Andrelczyk Amusement Academy streams, please let me know, and I will hopefully get a chance to put those in play. So until next time, thank you guys very much for watching. Bye now.